For those of you just joining us, welcome to this online information webinar. Today we will talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the residents of third country nationals in Slovakia. Please note that if you are a citizen of any EU member state, the information included in this webinar doesn't refer to you, but it is applicable only to foreigners outside the European Union. Today's presenters are Lydia and Maria, legal consultants from IOM Migration Information Center that is providing you this webinar. Therefore, let me start by briefly introducing our center. MIG was founded in 2006 in Bratislava. Its aim is to help foreigners to integrate into the Slovak labor market and society. We offer our services to the third country nationals who have been already granted a temporary, permanent, or tolerated residence, or who wish to apply for any of these types of residence in Slovakia. Other beneficiaries of mixed services are Slovak citizens helping foreigners or employers of third country nationals, and we cooperate also with communities of migrants through our cultural mediators. Migration Information Center offers free legal counseling regarding residence, employment, business, citizenship, and other relevant legal issues. Moreover, MIG provides free employment and social counseling, so if you are looking for a job, our experts can help you with editing your CV, prepare you for a job interview, and provide overall support in mapping the Slovak labor market. If you are looking for educational or retraining course, we can offer you a financial contribution provided that the course will help you find a new job, improve your current employment or business. Migration Information Center is also well known by providing open courses of Slovak language and social and cultural orientation. Now let's move to the topic of this webinar and let's talk about types of residence in Slovakia and the impact of COVID-19 on them.
If you wish to live in Slovakia or are already living here, you will most probably have either a temporary or a permanent residence. The temporary residence is linked to a specific purpose, such as business, employment, study, or specific activity, etc. The linkage to a specific purpose means, for example, that if you have a temporary residence for business, you cannot be employed and vice versa. However, some types of residence allow you to conduct several types of activities. For instance, a temporary residence for studies allows you to study, conduct business, and work for up to 10 or 20 hours weekly. Also, you are allowed to study with any kind of temporary residence. As for the permanent residence, we distinguish among three subtypes of it. You can have a permanent residence for 5 years, permanent residence for unlimited period, or a long-term residence. You can obtain the permanent residence for 5 years mainly if you are married to a Slovak citizen. The permanent residence for unlimited period then follows the permanent residence for 5 years and can be applied for after 4 years. The long-term residence usually follows the temporary residence and can be applied for after 5 years of uninterrupted residence in Slovakia. Unlike the temporary, the permanent residence is not linked to a specific purpose and allows you to work, conduct business, or study at the same time. Due to the spread of COVID-19, the foreign police is currently working in a limited regime and they are only accepting selected types of applications. It is also important to note that the foreign police restricted their office hours these days. As this information might be subject to frequent changes, I would recommend you follow our website when we publish up-to-date information about the current situation.
The Slovak Parliament has approved an amendment to the Act on the Residence of Foreigners, which is dealing with issues in connection with the spread of the COVID-19 disease. The amendment is in force from 9th of April. It defines a crisis situation as an extraordinary situation or a state of emergency declared in connection to the COVID-19 disease. In Slovakia, it has been proclaimed on 11th of March and it still lasts. The amendment solves some ongoing problems faced by foreigners without the residence in Slovakia, as well as foreigners who have already been granted the residence in the Slovak Republic. If you entered Slovakia legally, so it means with a visa or based on visa-free regime, and you are not granted the residency, you are authorized to stay here until 1 month after the revocation of the crisis situation. If you are a holder of temporary, permanent, or tolerated residence that is expiring during the crisis situation, or even within 1 month of the situation being revoked, you don't have to worry. The validity of your residence will be extended until 2 months after the revocation of the crisis situation. As my colleague mentioned, the foreign police is working in limited regime and they are accepting only the applications for the temporary residence or permanent residence for unlimited period of time. But if you are currently abroad and would like to submit any of these applications, you should be able to do it at the Slovak diplomatic or consular mission abroad. If you are interested in this option, I suggest to contact the Slovak Embassy or Consulate General first to make sure that your application will be accepted there. If you decide to submit your residence or renewal application after the crisis situation is over, the foreign police will be able to accept the required documents even if they are older than 90 days. But only as long as they were not older than 90 days during the crisis situation and you didn't leave Slovakia before the submission of your application. Those of you who are holding a temporary residence for the purpose of doing business and will be submitting your renewal applications next year, you are not obliged to meet the requirement of minimum income or profit for this year. You just need to submit an affidavit stating that your business activities have been affected by the crisis situation, along with a renewal application and other necessary documents. As you surely know, foreigners with granted residence in Slovakia have certain obligations that they have to comply with in specific deadlines set by law. The amendment has also affected most of these deadlines. We can divide them in 3 categories: those that were extended by the period of crisis situation, those that were suspended by the crisis situation, and deadlines that were not affected at all and are still applicable. Let's look closer to the first category. If you are granted a temporary residence for the purpose of employment, in general you have 60 days from the termination of your employment to find a new job or to change the purpose of your residence. Otherwise, the foreign police will start with its cancellation. Almost the same applies when you are granted a temporary residence for the purpose of studies. You have 30 days since you successfully completed your final exams or your university studies to apply for temporary residence renewal or different type of residence. Under the normal circumstances, if you don't do that within these 30 days, the foreign police will begin to cancel your residence. But according to the amendment, this 60 and 30 days span is extended by the period of crisis situation. So it means that if this period has already started for you before the crisis situation, the foreign police will not initiate the cancellation of your residence during the crisis situation because it's prolonged by its duration. Now let me mention a few important deadlines that are suspended during the crisis situation. In the other words, that they are temporarily not enforced by the law. Under the normal circumstances, you shall submit a document on health insurance and medical report confirming that you don't suffer from any disease endangering public health within 30 days from receiving your residence card. Also, you shall report the change of your personal data, passport, address within 5 business days. Likewise, the same 5 working days period stands for obligation to apply for a new residence card in case of the change of data or in case of its loss, theft, or damage. In standard situation, if the reason for which your residence was granted ceased to exist, you shall report it within 3 business days. All of these deadlines are suspended by crisis situation, so basically you are not obliged to fulfill them. Moreover, the 100-day period during which you normally have to enter Slovakia once being granted your residence doesn't run during a crisis situation. But keep in mind that there are certain deadlines that haven't been affected by the law amendment. Mainly, the requirement to apply for a change of your document on residence at least 30 days before its expiration. Also, your obligation to be present at the territory of Slovakia for more than half of the time of your granted residency in calendar year is not affected by the law change. It means that your absence is counting towards this deadline despite of crisis situation. Additionally, the amendment waived certain duties set by the law on the residence of foreigners. Until the revocation of a crisis situation, you are not obliged to leave Slovakia within the deadline set in the decision on administrative expulsion. Likewise, if you remain in Slovakia because you were provided institutional emergency healthcare or because of quarantine measure, you don't have to leave within 7 days of losing the reason for being allowed to remain. Moreover, if your baby was born in Slovakia or any EU member state and you as a parent didn't manage to apply for a baby's residence, you don't have to ensure the departure of your newborn within 90 days after birth. As we mentioned before, the foreign police is currently working in limited regime until the further notice, and you can submit only the application for the renewal of the temporary residence and the application for permanent residence for unlimited period of time. Therefore, we decided to explain these two legal matters in more detail.
The temporary residence is always granted for a specific period, depending on the purpose you're applying for. The residence can be granted for a maximum of 5 years in case of employment, a maximum of 3 years for business, or for a maximum of 6 years for studies. These time limits are not final, and if you wish to stay in Slovakia after they elapse, you can apply for the renewal of your residence. Your renewal application can be submitted at the foreign police, and according to the latest law change, also at the Slovak embassy abroad, if you are abroad due to the crisis situation and borders closure. Despite this change, it is necessary to mention that many Slovak embassies work in restricted mode too these days and have suspended their services, so the submission of a renewal application might not be as straightforward as the law suggests. Therefore, as my colleague already mentioned, we recommend you contact the particular embassy or check their website before a planned visit. The renewal application must be submitted in person, which means that you cannot authorize anyone else to apply on your behalf. It is necessary to apply for renewal no later than on the last day of your current temporary residence validity. Once you have applied, your residence in Slovakia remains authorized until the decision on your renewal application is made. Despite this, we strongly recommend applying beforehand, some 3-4 months before the expiration of your current residence, so that you can smoothly transfer from one residence to another. This is especially important in case of temporary residence for employment, as if you do not have a valid residence, although you might be in the renewal process, you are not allowed to work. Plus, as my colleague already mentioned, there's a new law amendment according to which, should your residence expire during the crisis situation, it is automatically extended by law. So the original date for which you were granted temporary residence is currently extended. When applying for the renewal, it is first of all necessary to submit a completed application form and a valid passport. The police cannot refuse to accept your application, even if it's incomplete, if you submit these two documents. You can submit all the rest of the necessary documents later in the process. The other documents you will need are the proof of the purpose of your stay, a document on financial coverage, health insurance confirmation, and a proof of accommodation. The permanent residence for a limited period is, in most cases, something like a renewal of a permanent residence for 5 years. You can apply for it after 4 years of having a permanent residence for 5 years, which is the one acquired mostly through marriage to a Slovak, or if you are a minor child of a foreigner with this type of residence. Some of what I have said before about the renewal of a temporary residence is also valid here. The application must be submitted in person at the foreign police. Currently, it should be also possible to apply at the embassy. And for your application to be accepted, you need a completed form and a valid passport. Other necessary documents are a proof of sufficient financial resources and a health insurance confirmation. The police officer may also ask for a proof of accommodation, as well as for a document proving that the reason for which you are granted residence still exists. Some more documents are needed in case the applicant is a minor child who didn't have a permanent residence for 5 years before, but I will not go into the details unless it is of interest for some of you. As its title suggests, this kind of residence is granted for an unlimited period. Once you have it, you no longer have to apply for its renewal. The only periodic application you will have to submit is the application for a new residence card, as the cards are usually issued with a 10-year validity. However, it is also necessary to keep in mind that even this residence can be cancelled by the police. This can happen, for instance, if your marriage to a Slovak citizen terminates within 5 years of receiving a permanent residence for 5 years, if you apply for material need assistance, or if you are abroad for more than 180 days without having sent a notification to the foreign police. Although this webinar is about residence and not about employment, we realize that having a job is crucial for maintaining temporary residence in Slovakia in case of employment, and that is why we decided to include this information as well. If you have a temporary residence for employment, especially if you have a so-called single permit and you wish to change your job, you can only if the change is approved by the Labor Office. Both you and your employer must make several steps before you start working in your new position. First of all, the employer must report a vacancy to the Labor Office. After 20 business days, you can submit your new employment contract or promise of employment to the foreign police. This used to be done mostly in person before, but as we have already mentioned, the police is only accepting 2 types of applications in person at the moment. According to our information, you can request the employment change by post now, by sending your contract or your promise together with a photo of a biometric page of your passport and a short letter explaining what you are asking for. Once the police has your new contract or your new promise, they ask for the approval from the Labor Office, and when they receive it, they issue a document called Additional Data on Employment, just like the one you can see on the slide, with data on your new employer and position. Once you have this paper, you can start working for your new employer or in your new position. Once again, this procedure is applicable only if you have a single permit, but not in case you have successfully completed high school or university studies in Slovakia. If you have questions about that, feel free to ask them later in the chat.
We came to the end of our presentation, so now it's time for you to ask questions using chat. If you will be interested in our services in future, you can visit us in our office in Bratislava and Košice, or contact us at our phone numbers that you can see in front of you, or email us at mic@iom.int. Please note that in order to prevent the spread of the COVID-19, MIC provides its services currently only via phone and email. All information that we discussed here and even more can be found at our webpage www.mic.iom.sk.
This is what the webpage looks like when you open it. And then for the current situation, you might want to go down to news. And we have here an article called COVID-19 Official Measures and Important Information, where we gather and update all the relevant information regarding COVID-19 and the official measures that were adopted in connection with it. You can see here the categories which might be of interest to you. Okay, so we can go to the questions that you post in the chat. Maybe we'll start with the first one. I will first read the question and then we'll answer it. So there is a question. My wife is in Slovakia to reunify with me during my research stay. Now she accepted as a PhD student, but she needs to wait till September but our temporary residence expires at the end of June. What should we do? I'm not completely sure whether I understand completely this answer. So if I understand correctly, both you and your wife have a temporary residence and you need to renew it, which you can still do. Even these days, the foreign police is operating. They're accepting, even though they are working in a limited regime, they're still accepting renewal applications. So you still might submit that. If not, if your question is that your wife would like to change the purpose of her stay, maybe from family reunion to studies, then this kind of applications are currently not accepted. They would only be accepted if you got an exception from the competent directorate of the border and foreign police. But if not, I would recommend you wait until the restrictions are lifted, even though the residence you were granted initially should expire in June. If it expires during the crisis or within 1 month of the crisis being revoked, and we still do not know when this will happen, then the residence will be automatically extended. So you will be able to apply for the change in purpose or the renewal of your residence, or your wife will be able to do so even later.
Okay, so we have another question from Arife. After 11th of May, I still can't apply for a new temporary residence application. Will they accept my documents which are older than 90 days now? They were not before COVID. Extra 1 month given will be enough to complete the process and get my residence card. When now the foreign police is working in limited regime and you can apply only for temporary residence renewal and permanent residence for unlimited period of time. The foreign police is working in limited regime until the further notice. So when they come to standard mode of operation, you can apply for a temporary residence with a new application. If you, as we were discussing, if the foreign police will accept documents that are older than 90 days, but only provided that they were not older than 90 days during the crisis situation, and also you didn't leave the country before you applied for a temporary residence. Extra 1 month given will be enough to complete the process and get my residence card. So it depends for which temporary residence, for which purpose you are applying, because there are different periods for foreign police to decide. So if you are applying for temporary residence for the purpose of studying, there is a 30 days period for decision of foreign police. If you are applying for temporary residence for the purpose of employment, usually in general it's 90 days. So it depends on the purpose of your temporary residence.
There is another question from Isidora. Isidora is asking, my temporary residence permit was approved starting 22nd of November 2019, but I was notified on February 24, 2020, which date is considered the start date for 180 days deadline to enter the country. Well, according to the Act on the Residence of Foreigners, the temporary residence expires. It's not that the foreign police can decide whether or not cancel it. It expires if you do not enter the country within 180 days from being granted the residence. So you should enter the country within 180 days from the end of November last year. This 180 days period does not run during the crisis, but it's counted from the moment you received the permit, not when you were informed about it.
Okay, another question is from Irena. Is the application for citizenship after the crisis situation supposed to be submitted at the district office or foreign police? So You shall submit your application along with other necessary documents for citizenship in person, either at the district office at the regional seat, more concretely at the Department of Internal Administration, according to the place of your permanent or last permanent residence in the territory of Slovak Republic. And if you are abroad, you can do it at the diplomatic mission or consular office of the Slovak Republic. So not foreign police.
There is another question from Snežana. I've read that from Monday, the 11th of May, the foreign police is going to start accepting applications for temporary residence permit. My wife and child should have applied on 18th of March through the Slovak embassy in Skopje, but it was postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. We're non-EU citizens, and my question is regarding the validity of the documents, which in this case are going to be older than 90 days. Is the foreign police going to accept them? Or my question regarding the entry in Slovakia and the mandatory state quarantine. I have been granted temporary residence visa through employment and thinking about coming to Bratislava, if all good, after the 15th of June. Am I going to be required to go to 14 days mandatory state or home quarantine? And if so, are the other people in the apartment should also be in quarantine? Also, is it possible to stay at a hostel or other place for these 14 days besides the address in the pobyt? So let's start first with the first part of this question. As my colleague mentioned during the presentation, the foreign police can accept documents which are older than 90 days, but only in case the applicant was already in Slovakia during the crisis situation. Those documents were not older than 90 days during the crisis, and he or she did not leave Slovakia before submitting his or her application. So it doesn't apply for applications that will be submitted at the Slovak embassy abroad. Regarding the quarantine, the measure on quarantine is still in place, but it's impossible to predict whether or not it will be in place on 15th of June. So I would recommend you follow the updates on our website and on the official website of the government regarding COVID, as these measures may change from one day to another, and it's impossible to predict whether the measures will be still the same as they are today. For the moment, everybody who enters Slovakia, except for some exceptions, has to go to a state quarantine, but we still do not know what the situation will be like in the middle of June.
Next question is, how early can we apply for the renewal of our residence permit? Is it 3 months prior to expiring of our current residence? So basically, you shall apply at least on the last day of the validity of your current residence. But we advise you, especially when you have a temporary residence for the purpose of employment, to apply 3 months prior to expiring, so you go smoothly from one residence to another residence, because without valid residence you are not able to work. But in general, it's at the last day of the validity of your current residence.
There is a question from Lily. I'm a citizen of Ukraine. I applied for my temporary residence in Kiev, Slovak embassy. I have original of confirmation from foreign police who granted temporary residency for employment from 19th of December 2019. Is that enough to enter Slovakia by car if I haven't got ID card yet? Well, unfortunately, we do not have at our disposal the exact wording of the instruction according to which border police decides who they let enter and who they don't let enter the country. In my opinion, a confirmation of being granted residence is a proof that you have been granted residence. Moreover, the Act on the Residence of Foreigners prohibits the foreign police from banning you the entry if you are a valid resident. But it might be quite useful to contact the border police beforehand, as we do not have the instruction according to which they're operating. The information that we have is from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and what they published is that the foreigners who are granted residence in Slovakia should present themselves at the border with a valid residence card or with a confirmation on registration on their residence.
Question from Gokul. I'm currently doing masters and my RP validity date ends on 30th June 2020. Due to the COVID-19 situation, what is my new validity date for my RP? Can you please let me know on this? I'm a citizen of India. So under the normal circumstances, if you finish your studies, you need to, and you are not a student anymore. So if you finish your university studies, you need to inform the foreign police within 3 working days that the purpose of your residence ceased to exist, and also then foreign police will not begin to cancel your residency within 30 days since you successfully complete your studies. But since there is a crisis situation and there is this new amendment, this 30 days period that have foreign police, and after which they will start to cancel your residence, is extended by the crisis situation. So it's very hard for us to tell you what is your new validity, because we don't know when the crisis situation will be over. And also, you don't need to fulfill the obligation to inform the foreign police within 3 working days that the purpose of your residency, so it means studying, ceased to exist, because these deadlines are suspended. So it's very hard to say when your RP, the validity of your RP is over.
A question from Andres. I have a spouse visa for 5 years, currently coming to an end. We did notify the police that my partner and me, would be out of the country for more than 180 days to apply for the unlimited visa, which is a valid health certificate. Finance support can be from the country we're at the moment. So I assume that by a spouse visa you mean a permanent residence for 5 years, which you can get as a spouse of a Slovak national. As I already mentioned, after 4 years of having this residence, you can apply for permanent residence for an unlimited period of time. When applying for this type of residence, you need to prove a valid health insurance, which must provide you coverage in Slovakia. Normally, with a permanent residence, you're obliged to be part of the public health insurance scheme in Slovakia. So being insured in one of the public health insurance companies that provide health insurance in Slovakia, and only if you fall under one of the exceptions, like if you work abroad or if you conduct business abroad, and if you live abroad for a long period and you're insured there, then you don't have to be a part of the public health insurance scheme, but to fulfill the conditions of permanent residence, you still have to have some insurance in Slovakia. As for the financial support from the country you're in at the moment, well, any document that you submit to the foreign police, whether it's account, balance statement in your name or in your spouse's name, together with her affidavit, must be, first of all, in Slovak. So if you have a foreign bank account statement, it must be translated to Slovak, but it's not a problem if it's foreign or if it's an.
Another question from guest. Hi, thank you for the webinar. Really helps us as foreigners. I have a valid temporary residence permit due to employment, but my employment ended on 30th April and my card is only valid until 30th May. I have 60 days to look for a new job. Now, due to crisis, this doesn't apply yet. My question, is it possible to renew my TR and extend the date? Because I don't have an employment or promise of employment, so I can renew it, I believe. Please help. Okay, so foreign police is working in limited regime and they are accepting application for temporary residence renewal, but you cannot renew your temporary residence for the purpose of employment because you don't have employer. So with the application for renewal, you should submit also employment contract. And since you don't have it, you cannot apply for renewal. But as we said, if your residency expires during the crisis situation, don't worry. You have 2 months. You can stay here until 2 months, so your residency is extended. And during that time, maybe you will find an employer and you can apply for renewal.
I would maybe just add that you can technically submit your renewal application even if you don't have a valid employment contract or a promise of employment yet, but you have to count with what will happen after it, because the foreign police will accept your application even if it's incomplete. But then they will suspend the procedure. They will send you a letter stating that the employment contract or a promise of employment is missing. And if you decide to do so, you can later submit an employment contract, but you have to keep in mind that the position for which you are applying has to be notified to the labor office at least 20 business days before you submitted your renewal application. So it is technically possible, but not always a good idea if you are not sure that you then will be able to bring a new employment contract for a position that has already been notified in advance to the labor office. Honor has a question. I was granted temporary residence for 2 years based on employment, but my ID card is given for 1 year as I provided my address for a year. Is it enough to provide new proof of address to extend it for 1 more year, or do I need to provide extra documents? So when a card is issued for a shorter period than a residence permit, you need to apply for a new card normally within no later than 30 days before its expiration. When applying for a new card, you need to submit an application form for a new card, which is the same one that is used for the renewal of your temporary residence. You need to attach one picture of yours, proof of new address, which could be either an affidavit on the provision of accommodation, or it can be a new lease contract with the signatures notarized. And also you have to present a valid passport and pay a fee, which is normally €4.50. In that case, the foreign police will issue a new card within 30 days, or if you need it quickly, you can pay €24.50, and then the police should issue your card within 2 business days.
Okay, question from Andres. Where can I find which embassies are dealing with visa application? So the list of the embassies is you can find at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the webpage of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and there you have always the webpage where you can contact them. So I advise before to email them or call them if they are accepting a visa application, because now during the crisis situation, as we said, a lot of embassies are working in limited regime as well. If I apply in an embassy, documents need also to be in Slovak or can be in the language of the country I am. In general, it has to be in Slovak language. For other possibilities, I would suggest to ask at the embassy directly, but in general, the documents needs to be in Slovak language.
Hello, my kid and my wife went for vacation to a new country, and they can't travel due to the COVID pandemic. Deadline is 180 days, or it is extended. So if you're kid and wife have a temporary residence, they're obliged to stay in Slovakia for more than half of every calendar year in which they are granted permit. So it means that if they have a temporary residence from January till December during the whole year, it means at least 183 days in Slovakia, otherwise cancelled. Unfortunately, the recent law change did not change the what you can do, or what they can do if they miss this deadline, is then apply for the pardon of this deadline at the ministry. Because despite the fact that the law did not modify this obligation, there is a part of the law which enables the Ministry of Interior or the Minister of Interior pardon even other deadlines which have been missed due to the crisis situation and which were not affected by the law change.
How many days does it take to change one TR based on employment contract to another? This question, I don't know if you mean that you will be applying for renewal with a new employment contract, or you just want to change an employer during the validity of your temporary residence. Because if your temporary residence is valid and you just want to change an employer, there is an answer. Okay, so change the employer during the validity of your temporary residence. The process is as following. So your new employer must publish a new vacancy at the labor office, and after 20 working days, you will bring a new employment contract to the foreign police, and the foreign police will contact the labor office if they agree with your employment, and if the labor office confirms that they agree with your employment, then the foreign police will issue additional data on employment, as my colleague was talking about it during the presentation. So there is no statutory limit. There is no limit in law for that. So I don't know how long it will take to foreign police to issue additional data on employment. And since now they are accepting, the foreign police is accepting only applications for temporary residence renewal and applications for permanent residence for unlimited period of time, you shall apply for a change of employer by post and wait for the answer.
A master's degree student, and I want to apply for PhD studies here in Slovakia. My residency permit will end at the end of August, but registration for PhD studies is announced to be on the 1st of September. But I have to apply for a residency permit. My question is when to apply, and I don't know how the situation will be since my residency permit ends before PhD registration and enrollment. Here you have two options. You can either apply for the 9-month renewal after the completion of your master's, or you can simply submit your renewal application before the end of August without a PhD confirmation. The police needs to accept your renewal application even if you just submit a completed application form and a valid passport, even if you don't have a confirmation on PhD yet. Then they will accept your application, and then when they realize that there are some documents missing, they will send you a letter stating that they interrupted the decision making on your application because some documents are missing. They will give you a deadline. It might be 30, it might be 60 or 90 days, depends on case-by-case basis, and you'll have time to submit the PhD confirmation within a specified deadline, so that then the foreign police can proceed with the decision on your renewal.
Question from Lenka. Do you have any information about embassies or foreign police opening for a new permit applications anytime soon? I got an information today from the Slovak embassy in Serbia that they will start accepting new permit visa applications in half May. This is forwarded information from person who spoke with embassy officer. So foreign police is working in limited regime until the further notice. So as soon as we got some new information, we will publish them on our webpage. So I would suggest to follow our webpage or check webpage of Ministry of Interior. And for the embassies, I would suggest to contact embassies directly. This particular embassy that you would like to apply at, contact them directly via email or phone to find out if they are able to accept your application. So thank you for your questions. All questions that we didn't manage to answer, please send them to our email mic@iom.int and we will reply you the answer. You can contact us also at our phone numbers, and all information can be found at our webpage www.mic.iom.int. Thank you very much for your attention and have a good evening. Goodbye.